You're going to learn how to profit from things that only make most people poorer. This is Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold.
You probably already know who today's guest is because he's one of the most recurrent guests in Get Rich Education history. He's the Rich Dad Advisor for real estate with about 3 decades of experience in both the management and development of the multifamily space. We're talking about big apartment buildings here. He runs MC Companies. They're a real estate syndicator that has somewhere between 8 and 10,000 units now, and they're chiefly in Arizona, Texas, and Oklahoma. In fact, I was just with him in his Scottsdale, Arizona office earlier this month. He also does tons of work with community and giving. He's a really giving guy. He's won multiple Best Places to Work awards there in Arizona. Welcome back to Get Rich Education, Ken McElroy.
Thanks, Keith. How are you, man? Great to see you again.
Hey, it's so good to be back with you. You know, a lot of investors today are thinking, gosh, we just came off a really rough year, a really strange year last year. Real estate investors are thinking about how they need to prepare differently in 2021. What do you tell them?
Well, it's funny. This is one of those big questions. Is like, we have all this unemployment. We have businesses that are obviously closing, and we have people moving all over the place because now they can. Their employers are letting them, and maybe, there's all kinds of reasons people are moving. But what I tell people right now is, take a look at the migration patterns that, are really kind of the trails. So, where are the moving trucks going? Where are people turning in their out-of-state driver's licenses? Where are they doing change of residences at the post office? And all that is data. And what it's doing, Keith, is it's producing bubbles in some areas and troubles in others, And that's pretty normal, but that's been going on forever, guys. This just happens to be the reason today. I mean, I've been around properties where we had military bases leave, literally like shut down because of prior administration. And all of a sudden, you can't rent there. And so, things happen and people move around. And so the biggest thing I think is let's see where the dust settles. And then you don't want to be a pioneer anywhere, and you want to use real data. And I know you're really good at this. You want to use facts and figures and specific things to try to find out where people are going. And then you want to be part of that movement.
That's a great point. In fact, I was just looking at the U-Haul migration data this morning. And for those that don't know, is that U-Haul, yes, like the moving and trucking company, they have data on where people are moving away from and where they're moving to. So when we look at who the big winners are, and that would be net in-migration, Arizona was 5th, Ohio 4th, Texas 3rd, Florida 2nd, and 1st was Tennessee in the net in-migration states. So that's what we're talking about here. And we can also think about, we want to look for tenancies where their employers seem to be more sustainable here in this pandemic. That might be something like where if someone has a job in technology or federal government, well, that's probably a good thing. And that tenant's income base is probably going to be sustainable. And then we're looking at other things like if their job is related to tourism or the hospitality industry in any way, or oil, that's probably a more concerning thing. So it's really about a requalification of tenants in these weird times.
It is. And it's funny, like it's easy to pick on California right now. And by the way, they deserve it. But But when you look at somebody, obviously everybody knows Elon Musk and has moved to Austin and Oracle, and I think what people don't realize is they focus on that issue. They're like, oh, he's moved. It's a real estate issue. Like if he's moving there and he's going to move his plant and he's going to move his people and he's going to move his headquarters, that's a real estate issue. That's a local real estate issue. And as you start to see this happen, whether they go to Florida or they're moving out of New York or they're moving out of California or Seattle or they're moving in or whatever it is, people are making decisions, and it's really making massive changes to the local real estate markets on retail, on commercial, on housing, on rentals, all of those kinds of things. That's been going on forever. And as you know, you and I look at this stuff every day. So for a lot of people, that's big news. for me, it's just one more real estate story along a whole bunch of others that, as people continue to do that and they move because of safety, because of weather, because of low taxes, because of wages that they can pay, some of their employees and things like that. That's what people need to watch are those things.
And it's funny that you mentioned California. I was just talking about the U-Haul migration data. California was named as the biggest loser, ranking 50th out of 50. It means they had more net out migration than any other state. So it's really paying attention to things like that. And then when we think about certain communities in certain metro areas, sometimes we might think about proximity to central business district. Just 2 years ago, that's something that meant substantially more. Even 1 year ago, that's something that meant substantially more than today. With work from home trends, living in a suburban area or a rural area just is not the disadvantage that it used to be.
No. And traditionally, those areas are very expensive. But they're very convenient to a lot of things. And I think people are moving away because of the COVID, out of the dense areas and moving more to the rural areas. And ironically, those areas are less expensive generally too. And that's interesting. As I started looking at all this information, like 72% of people are actually relocating within their own state. So it's not as much out-of-state migration as you think, even though those are all real numbers. The truth is they're moving in-state. The overwhelming majority are just moving. Obviously, if you live in San Francisco and your rents were $4,000 a month, which is not unheard of, and you can move 20, 30 minutes away to a suburb and buy a home and your payment is $3,000, you're going to do that. And so that's what's happening as you start to see these people moving out of areas and moving in other areas.
Let's talk about some of those amenities that tenants desire now that there is a bit more desire to not have to be so close to that central business district, especially with apartment trends, because you deal in the apartment space so much. What do tenants want today, for example, Ken, that maybe just wasn't nearly as important even as little as a year ago?
It's a good question. So security gates are a big deal. A lot of people like that. So we're putting those in every single one of our buildings. And so, what you're finding is that there's a lot of, single people, male, female, doesn't really matter. And a lot of divorcees too, that typically move out of homes into some of these higher end apartments, which is primarily what we do. And so that's our demographic, like it or not, that's our demographic. So we have to design our properties to that. And so we put in virtual fitness centers, literally, where you can go in. You have spin bikes like Peloton stuff that they can use. We do those. We put in business offices with, all the Wi-Fi and the printers and all those kinds of things, so they can use all the amenities. You have to really be wired up. The smart home stuff is really taking off right now. So think about, you remember the old days where you used to have to use a key. Well, now you can use your iPhone and to open doors and turn on lights and things like that, even watch pets. So it's crazy how this has all evolved. And, you have to stay on that trend right now but even with COVID, people want a bit of a community. And the other one that we've done, Keith, is we've had to embrace package delivery. You think about how far that's come. So right. You got a 200 or 300 unit property, and you have to have a package delivery system for those people. And so, all of those kinds of things are amenities that are changing right now.
I spent a lot of last month in Las Vegas visiting various friends. And yes, as a visitor, it sure is annoying having to get the gate code or figure that out or figure out how you're going to get over to those places. But a lot of people in real estate know that you typically can attract more people to your community if you have a gate, because there is that perception of safety and security there. So in these larger apartment communities that you're often dealing with, is there even more of a premium on a gated community now that we've had more and more instances of civil unrest across the United States recently?
There absolutely is. And the other thing that I forgot to mention are pets. So I don't know if you guys realize, but during the pandemic, almost all the shelters ran out of animals, which is good. Obviously, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, so we actually we were ahead of this trend. We actually got a national award from the Humane Society a few years ago by adopting pet policies. And we actually started putting in dog parks at all the properties, literally fully, gated dog areas, dog runs, and things like that for the pets. And those are the kinds of things that you need to do to stay ahead of it. Safety is definitely one of those things, and Keith, and that can come also from lighting. Having well lit areas. And so when it sounds weird, but when you go to a property and it's dark, that can make a difference on if somebody is going to move there or not move there, especially if they're coming home late from work or from the grocery store or whatever, or an area like yours where it can be very dark in the winter early. So those are real things that you have to take in consideration, when you're doing something like that.
Now, because you deal with apartment communities in different jurisdictions, in different states, in different cities, do you find that there is a variability among policies? For example, when you have a tenant that applies with a pet, do you have them submit a separate pet deposit, or is there no deposit and you just step up the amount of rent that they pay? Because this is a trend. Now that more people are working at home, you have more time to spend with a pet. More people want pets. You talk about shelters being cleared out. So how do you evaluate that from the tenant perspective across states?
It's a great question. So, well, let's be clear. There's no question that pets can do damage. So that's number one. So there's always some kind of a deposit, and then some companies have breed restrictions and weight restrictions, and we lifted that a few years ago, and we don't have either of those as a company. And it was a bit of a risk, but we did it 3 years ago. We've had no issues. It's been my experience that people that own pets are responsible people. They understand that they're going to have a pet deposit. They understand that they're going to have to pay for pet damage. And so we also have a resident insurance policy that helps protect that. But if they do have bigger animals, that's why we provided these pet areas. If you go into one of our offices today, as an example, Keith, we have pet bowls, we have pet leashes, we have pet collars, and we give them to the residents. And we just embraced the pet thing years ago, and it's really helped. And who's way before the pandemic, who it attracted? Seniors. A lot of seniors have pets, and they travel with them, and and so we didn't realize how big, but that was one of the policies that we rolled out a while ago. But like anything, you have to have the sufficient deposits around anything like that. But it's to answer your question, it's not really a state issue. In other words, it's more of a company issue. And so there are some companies that just flat out don't accept pets, oddly enough, just like in the hotels. Kimpton's embraced pet. I don't know if you know that. You can stay at any of the Kimptons anywhere and bring your pet. Well, a lot of big brands haven't done that. So it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, that's an interesting trend with the pets. If you think about the materials used inside a rental unit or an apartment unit, 20 or 30 years ago, it was more common to have carpeted flooring and laminate countertop. Those are the types of things that did not stand up to pets so well. And today, you're more likely to have vinyl plank flooring and granite or a different type of countertop, the sorts of things that stand up to pets. And this has got to be the sort of thing, your stance on pets, that increases your occupancy rate in apartment units in the face of a pandemic.
Oh, without a doubt. So, it's the same thing with kids, and I raised 2 kids. I'll tell you what, you look at my house when my kids were, say 1 to 6, is crayons on the wall, paint on the floor. Kids are kids. They do what they do. And so, to that point, you have to have, we call it hard goods. So we started doing wood floors, we started doing tile floors, we started doing things, but we also knew that there's going to be an amount of damage. It just is going to be most, and no homeowner that I know of, no renters that we know, just let their kids run crazy or their pets go crazy. It's just not that way. They just do stuff. And so, it's part of having them, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you just gotta make sure that you're protected. And the best thing you can do, in my opinion, is have your renters do a mandatory renter's insurance policy. And so on every single one of our renters, Keith, we have a renter's insurance.
That's a great point. A lot of people don't know about renter's insurance. They don't even know it exists. We're going to talk more about that when we come back, including some of these pandemic-induced trends in the housing market. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is Rich Dad Real Estate Advisor Ken McElroy. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold.
71% of Americans aren't saving enough for retirement. It's going to get worse as people live longer, and you need to start thinking differently. But you can't lose your time. Real estate is the investment vehicle that's made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. Keith Weinhold of Get Rich Education is host of one of America's top investing shows, Disrupting Wall Street. He's an international best-selling author and has been an active income property investor since 2002. He has created thousands in passive monthly income for countless followers, and now he has a free book, The 7 Principles for Creating Wealth in Your Life. Get your copy now at getricheducation.com/book. That's getricheducation.com/book. Because invest in what produces income for you now and later. Keith Weinhold is your guy. Sign up now at getricheducation.com/book.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. We're talking with Rich Dad Real Estate Advisor Ken McElroy in housing and rental trends that you need to be aware of this year in this COVID environment that I know you're tired of hearing about it, but we're still in as we are now. Tell us more about the renter's insurance and just how you administer that policy up front before the tenant's even placed.
Well, here's the thing, Keith. People don't do things generally intentionally. And so, but things happen. I mean, we have kitchen fires, we have floods, we have, stopped up bathrooms and stopped up toilets and things like that where, maybe the kids or the individuals, they stuff something down a toilet and it floods and, it ruins the upstairs and downstairs if they're on the second floor, and then you have kids and you have pets and you just have stuff, you have red wine, like it just happens. It is what it is, man. And that's part of what they live there for. So all of that stuff, what we decided to do years ago was just embrace this renter's insurance. So what we did is we went to a carrier and we cut a deal on a low cost renter's policy. We actually figured out what we want inside of those things. So if, for example, there's a kitchen fire, well, now we can actually turn that kitchen fire over to their insurance policy, the renters. And in the old days, the landlord used to have to take that, go in and fix that, maybe move them if it was bad. Hopefully no one was hurt. But now a lot of the small stuff, even water damage, we've been able to turn over to the individual renter's policy. So they're self-insuring themselves and they pay it through rent. So let's say their rent's $800 and the insurance policy is $20. So now it's $820. So it's mandatory. They sign up when they move in. It goes along with their lease, and it's just another level of insurance. And if it's something big, like we had a property in Houston where we lost 12 units to a fire, then of course the renter's insurance policy isn't going to cover that. You have to kick into the bigger policy, which is on the building. But what we found it does, Keith, is it saves us on our insurance costs for the bigger policy, because we're not turning in claims like we were, and a lot of it's being handled at the resident level. So we rolled that out a few years ago, but it's mandatory on every single tenant that we have.
This is like found cash flow. It's a way to keep your expense down as an income property owner. Talk to us more about what tenants are desiring. For example, have you found that they want a 3 or a 4 bedroom unit more often than they want a 2 bedroom unit? Now that people are working at home, they're also working out at home. Maybe they're homeschooling at home and so on. Can you talk to us about trends that way?
Yeah, it's been all over the map, man. I got to tell you. So we've had, as you know, there's a tremendous amount of adults that have moved in with their parents. And so you have that trend going. But then on the other side of that, you have a whole bunch of people that have moved home and maybe they had a 1 bedroom and now they want a 2. So there's all kinds of stuff going on right now. And in some cases, we've had 2 people that knew each other from work actually get a larger unit so that they could both work from home and kind of share the expense. And so it's been all over the map. But and then in another case, there's been some people that just don't want to be around anybody. right, because of the pandemic. So you have that. So there hasn't really been a lot of consistency around this issue. However, I will tell you, there's a heck of a lot more home offices. And so we are starting to see a move toward a little bit larger units. But on which ones depends on a case-by-case basis, primarily.
And the operations of apartment communities have changed in a number of ways as well. I know in the largest apartment building that I own, my property manager instituted something where in order for families to go in and use a laundry room, there's now a schedule. So for COVID reasons, people aren't overlapping with each other, and that makes them feel at peace. So are there any sort of other operational things like that that can make tenants feel more comforted, which can increase your occupancy rate because people are attracted to living there if they know you've already got these things in place?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, everything's changed, as you know, and the whole idea here is to keep everybody safe. And so, obviously there's a massive cleaning protocol with every single thing that we do. But beyond that, what we do is we have virtual tours now. So it's all automated, all done on AI. They can schedule it. They can go in and actually tour models without anyone there. And, we have all the cameras and all the stuff and all the safety features alongside of that. And of course, everything, all the rent collection and everything else, all the communication is all done via email and text and things like that. So it's been very, very interesting. We still do have our offices open for emergencies and things like that, because they do come up. But generally, like you said, everything's fairly scheduled, even tours. So a lot of people want to tour in person. And so we just encourage that. And we've made it as easy as we can so that they can just show up and be able to see something and not have to worry about the safety piece.
So we've been talking about the tenant angle and how they interact with your properties. Of course, you are a real estate syndicator. You're an expert at identifying the right property in the right area and helping investors come alongside you and your wisdom and your knowledge base. How has this affected your investors? Oftentimes, syndicators have a reserve budget where they can tap into it for implementing some of these things like remote viewing of properties and things like that. So how has that been for investors on the expense side for a syndicator?
That's a great question. Well, first, let me start off on the distribution side. So obviously in March, when we shut down and we're sitting there in April, everybody's scrambling, we don't know how much money we're going to collect. The country shut down. We don't know who's going to pay, who's not going to pay. And so everybody was scrambling in those first couple of months. And thankfully, as an industry, we all kind of shared a lot of information and a lot of best practices. And so those have evolved over time. How do we keep our residents safe? How do we keep our employees safe? And how do we satisfy our investors? So the first thing that we did is, which is something that you never want to do, is we told our investors that we were going to hold that quarter's distribution. And we did. And so in other words, we distribute every quarter. So our first quarter distribution, which would be paid out in April, we held. And, for obvious reasons, we don't know how much we're going to collect. And so luckily we did pretty well in that second quarter, and then we released the first quarter. And so we've been slowly communicating with our investors around that. And that is why investors invest. But on the same token, we're making sure that we have enough reserves, because we don't really know what are these renters going to pay or not pay. So we had an income issue, and we still do, even though the collections are up, but there are people that are hurting and there are people that can't pay. And there's people getting assistance through some of the state and local municipalities. And, so we're utilizing all the resources that we know of to help them. And so that's number one on the income side. On the expense side, obviously it's been more around the safety piece, the cleaning piece, and and all of that, on the common areas and things like that. So, but generally, our properties have we had staffs already. And so what we did is, and the interesting thing is, Keith, that a lot of people they decided not to move. So just like you're seeing low inventory on their residential housing, they did the same thing on the rentals. So while we weren't necessarily attracting new rentals, so in a weird way, whatever your occupancy was mid-March was what your occupancy was, mid-June.
Right. People don't feel safe moving out.
Yeah, right. So everybody kind of stayed in place. We didn't have a lot of people moving around, which was good and bad. And so what we did is we focused on, okay, how do we service everybody? We have residents with COVID, a lot of them. We had employees with COVID. We had a lot of stuff going on around that, and so trying to manage all of those things and keep everybody safe was our biggest priority. But we haven't really seen big increases on the expense side at the moment as a result of COVID, and so far so good.
Yeah, I participate in a couple syndications and I didn't get distributions, or distributions were postponed as well. I think a lot of people understand this is a once in a lifetime or once in a century sort of phenomena that with what we're talking about here. Well, Ken, is there any last thing that an investor, a new real estate investor, should keep in mind this year, whether that has to do with the pandemic or civil unrest or the inauguration of a new president, or just any last thing someone ought to be thinking about, maybe that they had not needed to think about so much just a year ago?
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of focus on, everything that's bad. And there is a lot of stuff, and you have to pay attention to that. But in 2008, we kind of had the same scenario. Things were bad. We had people losing their homes, and people, turn their keys over to the banks, and a lot of displacement and all that kind of stuff happened. This is very different. However, I also think that there's massive real estate opportunity as a result of all of this moving around. And we kind of alluded to that in the beginning. So if you can just back up from it a little bit and take a look at the things that are definitely there's going to be a lot of people that are going to do very well, from this by just paying attention, and not just in real estate, just because of where people are moving. And so, whether it's your local coffee shop that was just doing okay, and all of a sudden this little town ballooned up and they have, a lot more people there, or a grocery store, or a dry cleaner, or, a restaurant, or whatever it is, if the state's open or not open, I guess it makes a big difference. But in the long term, if those people stick and stay, there's going to be, things are changing, that's for sure. But there's a lot of people doing very, very well right now, and a lot of people that aren't. And the ones that are going to continue to do well are the ones that are going to pay attention and work, what I'd say, with the forces, instead of try to go back to the way it was.
It's the K-shaped economic recovery. The haves are certainly making out a lot better than the have-nots. It's unfortunate to see that disparity, but we know which side we'd rather be on. Yeah. Well, Ken, it's been valuable as always. Is there any best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So, obviously you go to kenmcelroy.com/getricheducation, and there you're going to find, a bunch of stuff, for your audience, specifically the 2021 real estate predictions video and notes and things like that. So just go to kenmcelroy.com. You'll find all that stuff /getricheducation. And we have a special for all your listeners.
Ken has that video there for you specifically for GRE followers. Again, that is at kenmcelroy.com /getricheducation. Ken McElroy, it's been great having you back on the show.
You too, Keith. Good seeing you.